I wish I had a funny story to tell you about what happened this week, like I try to always do. Usually my life's pretty funny, but this week it's been a teeth gritter. And I've handled some of it well, and some of it I haven't handled very well. And that kind of brings us to step 10. I've had to use step 10 quite a bit this week. I had to call 3 people back and apologize to them so far, and the week's not over. I still have tomorrow to go, but I think I'm out of the woods. And I hope that I can get started off on a different foot. The foot, I don't know which foot I got started off on this week, but it was the wrong foot. I want you to bear in mind, as we talk about step 10 tonight, that last week when I was in steps 8 and 9, when I was talking about forgiveness of self, and if you weren't here, I'm sorry you missed it. I'm not going to repeat it. I said that nowhere in the first 9 steps program of Alcoholics Anonymous does it suggest that I get down on my knees and ask God to forgive me for what I had done while I was practicing as an alcoholic. That it wasn't in the conference-approved literature to do that. Remember that I said in the first 9 steps, when we get to step 10, we're going to be held to a different standard. And we're going to talk about that tonight. But I want you to be, I want to point that out, because I don't want there to be any misunderstandings. That once I have started to practice this program and try to put it in action in my life, that I am not responsible for my actions. First 9 steps only. Now we're starting a new life in step 10. Let's start on page 84 in the big book. We're going to read the directions first tonight, and the commentary second. In the second complete paragraph, well, let's back up to the first complete paragraph that begins, "Are these extravagant promises?" They've just revealed the promises to us. It says, "Are these extravagant promises? We think not. They are being fulfilled among us, sometimes quickly, sometimes slowly. They will always materialize if we work for them." This is a program of action. You have to work in order to realize these promises in your life. And the action that we're now talking about is this thought brings us to step 10, which suggests we continue to take personal inventory and continue to set right any new mistakes as we go along. We vigorously commenced this way of living as we cleaned up the past. So that word "as" indicates to me that I'm supposed to put step 10 into action in my life as I am, to the best of my ability, to the extent that I understand it, to the extent that I have been told or suggested that I start to put step 10 into action as I'm working these first 9 steps. It doesn't say after we cleaned up the past. It says as we cleaned up the past. I've got to start taking responsibility for what I do today, now. I can't put off until I get to step 10 to start taking responsibility. Because once I have been given this opportunity, I'm in a whole new ball game, and I'm held to a different standard. It doesn't make any difference where I am in working the steps. I'm held to a different standard because I have been given a chance to learn how to save my life, and I have to make the most of it. And that's talking about being aware of what I do today. We entered the world of the Spirit. I'm supposed to have this thing called God consciousness now. It's starting to come on me. Our next function is to grow in understanding and effectiveness. Understanding of the God consciousness and the effectiveness of the way I use it in my daily living. This is not an overnight matter. It's something that I have to repeatedly try day after day after day, one day at a time. It should continue for our lifetime. So we're talking about lifelong disciplines, one day at a time. You know, these aren't things that we do one time and we're done with them. It's not like taking a chemistry course in high school. You know, when we get our final grade, we never have to think about chemistry again. This is about a disciplined life. And here's what I have to do in step 10. Continue to watch for selfishness, dishonesty, resentment, and fear. Step 4. When these crop up, we ask God to remove them. Step 6 and 7. We discuss them with someone immediately. Step 5. And make amends quickly if we have harmed anyone. Steps 8 and 9. Okay. So on a daily basis, step 10 asks me to work the guts of the program. Step 4 through 9. And those are the specific instructions of what I should do in those several sentences. After I do that, then we resolutely turn our thoughts to someone we can help. And that does not mean another alcoholic. Someone means somebody on the face of the planet. Somebody walking around. You know. Remember, I keep going back to Bill's story on page 14 and page 20 about how I'm responsible to help other people meet their needs. Their needs being for them to feel good about themselves through what I think, say, and do. You know, I can make people feel bad about themselves just by being unaware that what I think, say, and do has an effect on other people. That doesn't say that I'm powerful, but I can accomplish the same thing in many different ways, with each having a different result in another human being. You know, am I loving? Am I kind? Am I polite? Am I considerate? Do I say please? Do I say thank you? Do I say come here? You know, what am I doing to other people? How would I like to be treated the way I'm treating other people? And it says my standard now is love and tolerance of others is our code. You know, love of other human beings just because they're human beings. Recognizing that other people have rights. Recognizing that other people have problems. Recognizing that other people are not always what I would like them to be. You know, I have to be tolerant of other people in order for me not to become angry, thinking the only reason that you're angry is because you don't like me or because you are trying to make me feel bad about myself. Maybe they've got a pretty nasty life to live right that moment in their life. And I can't always tell what a person's motivation is for their behavior. Even if they tell me what it is, it probably isn't what their real motivation is. So I have to always be tolerant of people's behavior because I don't know what's motivating them. That doesn't mean that I can't protect myself against bad behavior with love. But it's senseless for me to become angry because I'm not being treated like I would like to be treated. You know, I'm having to hold myself to a different standard than other people, then I expect other people to hold me. I have to be tolerant of them, but they don't have to be tolerant of me. And that's a discipline that's tough. Nobody needs to tolerate me. Nobody is required to tolerate me. I'm required to tolerate you. Why? Because I'm not a normal person, and I'm required to do things that normal people aren't required to in order to save my life one day at a time, in order to be happily and usefully whole, in order to remain sober. And we have ceased fighting anything or anyone, even alcohol. For by this time sanity will have returned. We will seldom be interested in liquor. If tempted, we recoil from it as from a hot flame. We react sanely and normally, and we will find that this has happened automatically. We will see that our new attitude toward liquor has been given us without any thought or effort on our part. It just comes. That's the miracle of it. So what this is saying is if I have done my work, that the obsession sometime during this process will have been lifted from me. This compulsion to commit an irrational act will have been removed from me. Not because I talked myself out of it, not because I fought my way out of it, not because somebody else talked me out of it, because I have done the work. And there just isn't any substitute for doing the work if you want to lose the compulsion and live happily and usefully whole. We are not fighting it, neither are we avoiding temptation. We feel as though we had been placed in a position of neutrality, safe and protected. We have not even sworn off. Instead, the problem has been removed. I have yet to quit drinking. What I did was I started something. It says I have not sworn off, and I have not. I didn't come to Alcoholics Anonymous to get sober. I came to Alcoholics Anonymous so I would not have to drink anymore. What that result was, I didn't care. I just didn't want to have to drink anymore. Instead, the problem has been removed. It does not exist for us. We're neither cocky nor are we afraid. That is our experience. That is how we react so long as we keep in fit spiritual condition. And there's a key phrase which reoccurs in different forms over and over and over in this book, is a fit spiritual condition. And that means doing what I'm supposed to do every day. It's renewing my commitment every morning to try to live my life based on what I know of this program of Alcoholics Anonymous, to the best of my ability. And I am not all things to all people at all times. My abilities change from day to day, from hour to hour. But I tell people that I sponsor, and I have learned in my own recovery, that I have to work when times are good, because I am incapable of working when times are bad. The program of Alcoholics Anonymous cannot go into action in my life if I'm back into self-centered thinking. So what I have to do is, when times are good, I have to put some money in the bank. Every day I do these things. Every day I follow these disciplines in my life. It's putting a few pennies in the bank. And when my life blows up, I have to go to the bank and I have to draw some money out. And I don't draw pennies out. I draw dollar bills out. Some days I draw $5 bills and $10 bills out. And if I haven't put enough money in the bank, then I start going wacky. And I start thinking that alcohol is going to solve my problem again. You know, and the longer I let this self-centered thinking go on in my life, the more money I have to draw out of the bank in order to stay sober. And if I exhaust the account, there's no overdrafts. I have put my life in jeopardy. You know, and I've seen it happen over and over and over. People say, well, I don't need to do this anymore. Hey, hell, everything's great. You know, I say, well, bad times are coming. What are you going to do? I said, well, I'm okay. And if they're lucky, they come back in here crying their eyes out because they can't stand the pain. If they're not lucky, they come back in here drunk. And if they're real unlucky, they don't come back in. So if your life's going good today, you still have to do the work if you want to keep the promises in your life. And it says, it is easy to let up on the spiritual program of action and rest on our laurels. I don't need to do this anymore. Everything's great. My wife's back. My car didn't get repossessed, etc., etc., etc. We are headed for trouble if we do, for alcohol is a subtle foe. Subtle means it doesn't always identify itself before it polarizes you right between the eyes. It always doesn't announce itself. Subtle foe. It is also called insidious. Insidious is something that strikes from ambush. Anyone who gets ambushed is in a weakened condition because of the element of surprise. Alcohol is also patient. It never goes away. Alcoholism is forever, and alcohol is patient. We are not cured of alcoholism. What we really have is a daily reprieve contingent on the maintenance of our spiritual condition, one day at a time, contingent depending upon whether or not I am willing to work to keep in a fit spiritual condition. Every day is a day when we must carry the vision of God's will into all of our activities. How can I best serve Thee? Thy will, not mine, be done. These are thoughts which go with us constantly. We can exercise our willpower along this line all we wish. It is the proper use of the will. And here we come back to step 3 about the proper use of the will. And I'm going to repeat this, that you hear in the fellowship all the time people saying there is no place for willpower in the program of Alcoholics Anonymous. That is not true. We must use our willpower properly. God gave it to us for a purpose. We have just misused it. We need to bring our will and the power behind it into focus with God's will for us. You know, if I know God's will and I do not use the power that God has given me to bring my will into sync with His, then what good have I done myself? the proper use of the will. And you don't think you have any, you do. You've just been using it wrong, incorrectly. Much has been said about receiving strength, inspiration, and direction from Him who has all knowledge and power. If we have carefully followed directions, we have begun to sense the flow of His Spirit into us. To some extent, we have become God conscious. We have begun to develop this vital sixth sense. But we must go further, and that means more action. And that concludes the instructions on step 10 in the big book. But notice that it concludes with more action. And we'll talk about that next week. Let's go to step 11 and 12 and 12. Or step 10, rather. Sometime, I don't know when, I wrote this down on step 10. It says, attitude is the mother of thought which determines how I feel and act. And step 10 is about my attitude. About my attitude. Attitude about myself, about God, and about other people. And about what happens when that gets out of whack and how to correct it. It says, as we work the first 9 steps, we prepare ourselves for the adventure of a new life. And that term, new life, is important when you start to see the distinction about my responsibility for my past actions in step 1 through 9 and the new standard that I'm held to. But when we approach step 10, we commence to put our AA way of living into practical use day by day in fair weather or foul. Then comes the acid test. Can we stay sober, keep an emotional balance, and live to good purpose under all conditions? And one of the things that I visualize myself, I use some visual imagery, and we all do. But one of the things I visualize myself as being the same person under all conditions, so that I don't have people and circumstances dictating to me the kind of person that I am. Much like I told you happened to me this week. I struggle mightily to keep that out of my life because it makes my life very difficult to live. So, I think it's in one of the daily meditation books. I think it's August the 14th. It talks about, it was a quote from Robert Louis Stevenson about being a clock in a thunderstorm. Anybody read that? I think it's in the book A Day at a Time. A clock during a thunderstorm proceeds at its own private inner pace. It just keeps ticking. And that's what I like to visualize myself as a clock in a thunderstorm. Just nothing changes. It doesn't make any difference how severe the thunderstorm is, how much lightning, how much hail, how much rain. It just doesn't make any difference to the clock. It has the metronome beat and goes on the same. And that's the kind of person that I want to be. That's the kind of person that I struggle to be. That clock that just ticks. A continuous look at our assets and liabilities and a real desire to learn and grow by this means are necessities for us. We alcoholics have learned this the hard way. More experienced people, of course, in all times and places have practiced unsparing self-survey and criticism. It says more practiced people. That's the thing we've ever done it. For the wise have always known that no one can make much of his life until self-searching becomes a regular habit, until he is able to admit and accept what he finds, and until he patiently and persistently tries to correct what is wrong. So it says that the wise man is always trying to improve his life by correcting the errors in thinking that he is continually searching for. And how I think determines how I think, how I feel, and how I act. So I've always got to take a look at my thinking. When a drunk has a terrific hangover because he drank heavily yesterday, he cannot live well today. But there's another kind of hangover which we all experience whether we are drinking or not. That is the emotional hangover, the direct result of yesterday's and sometimes today's excesses of negative emotion, anger, fear, jealousy, and the like. If we would live serenely today and tomorrow, we certainly need to eliminate these hangovers. And I'm sure you've all experienced these emotional hangovers from these excesses. And they're different than the physical hangover from alcohol, but they're no more pleasant than that either. This doesn't mean we need to wander morbidly around in the past. It requires an admission and a correction of errors now. And now is in italic, which means that it is emphasized. Now is emphasized. And remember when I said when you put pennies in the bank, you got to go there, you got to draw dollars out, you got to cut off the withdrawals. And now means now. Our inventory enables us to settle with the past. When this is done, we are really able to leave it behind us. When our inventory is carefully taken and we have made peace with ourselves, the conviction follows that tomorrow's challenges can be met as they come. Although our inventories are alike in principle, the time factor does distinguish one from the other. There's a spot check inventory taken at any time of the day whenever we find ourselves getting tangled up. There's the one we take at day's end when we review the happenings of the hours just past. Here we cast up a balance sheet crediting ourselves with things well done and chalking up debits where due. Then there are those occasions when alone or in the company of our sponsor or spiritual advisor, we make a careful review of our progress since the last time. Many AAs go in for annual or semi-annual house cleanings. Many of us also like the experience of an occasional retreat from the outside world where we can quiet down for an undisturbed day or so of self-overhaul and meditation. So anytime, step 10 says, anytime you start to go out of whack, or I start to go out of whack, I can cut it off there. I can say, what in the hell is wrong with you? I don't like the way you're behaving. I think my brain's running my life again, and I'm going to be in control. And get to the bottom of it. And then at the end of the day, we take a look at our day to look for things that have troubled us that didn't cause any pain great enough for us to say, what the hell's wrong with you now? And we take a look at the subtleties of the way we've lived our life, the way I've lived my life today, and see, did I really produce the result I wanted to? when I dealt with this person, or when I did this. You know, what's the long-term effect? What was the immediate effect? You know, and I take a look at my actions every night, and it says, take credit for what you did well. And when we did our 4-step, and I talked about, there was always some discussion about, well, you put the good things about you on your 4-step too, and I said, if the good things got you drunk, go ahead and put it on your 4-step, you know. But otherwise, let's just talk about resentments and fears and sex problems. And in step 10, we're supposed to take credit for the things we do well. We're supposed to take credit for the progress that we're making. And when I say take credit, I can't think of any other way to convey the meaning. Take credit is what it says in the book. But to take credit means that there is a lack of humility. I guess another way to say it would be to be grateful, you know, for the things done well, and mean the same thing. Because anything that I do well is a result of following these disciplines. Because left to my own devices, I usually do things so that they don't come out well. Aren't these practices joy killers as well as time consumers? Well, it just depends on how you want to live your life, I guess. Life's a matter of attitude. You know, I talked to somebody the other night. He said, "What's wrong with me?" I said, "You don't like being an alcoholic." He said, "Well, do you like being an alcoholic? Doing all this shit?" I said, "Yeah." He said, "Well, why?" I said, "Because I'm happy and you're miserable." He said, "How'd you know I was miserable?" Most AAs spend most of their waking hours drearily rehashing their sins of omission or commission. Well, hardly. The emphasis on inventory is heavy only because many of us have never really acquired the habit of accurate self-appraisal. A couple key words in there: never really acquired the habit, and the word accurate kind of describes the situation I was in. I didn't have an accurate way to do any self-appraisal. I didn't have any yardsticks to use. I knew I didn't have any way to measure myself against the ideal. I knew the words and I knew what they meant, but I couldn't find myself in there because of all the rationalization and the justification. If she hadn't said that, I wouldn't have broken her jaw. You know, she got what she deserved. Once this healthy practice has become grooved, it will be so interesting and profitable that the time it takes won't be missed. For these minutes and sometimes hours spent in self-examination are bound to make all the other hours of our day better and happier. And at length, our inventories become a regular part of everyday living rather than something unusual or set apart. Before we ask what a spot check inventory is, let's look at the kind of setting in which an inventory can do its work. And there's a lot of people, and I used to be one of them, that I wish the hell this sentence wasn't in this book. It is a spiritual axiom. Axiom means that it is a truth so absolute that it cannot be defined, and I'm sure there'll be somebody that'll tell me that's not quite right, but I like the definition even if I did make it up. It is a spiritual axiom that every time we are disturbed, no matter what the cause, and no matter what the cause, there is something wrong with me. Every time I get disturbed, it's because of me and not because of people and circumstances. There's something wrong with my attitude about myself and about God and about other people, which causes my thinking to go haywire. And bad feelings are caused by bad thinking. And bad feelings cause bad behavior. It is a spiritual axiom that every time we are disturbed, no matter what the cause, there is something wrong with us. If somebody hurts us and we are sore, we are in the wrong also. But are there no exceptions to this rule? What about justifiable anger? And that's in quotation marks. If somebody cheats us, aren't we entitled to be mad? Can't we be properly angry with self-righteous folks? For us of AA, these are dangerous exceptions. We have found that justified anger ought to be left with those better qualified to handle it. And it talks about this in step 4 in the big book. That there are people perhaps that can handle anger, but as an alcoholic I can't. When I get angry, all kinds of things happen that I just don't end up being proud of. Even if other people don't see the result of my anger, I'm not proud of it because I can see it and I know what it means today. Few people have been more victimized by resentments than have we alcoholics. It mattered little whether our resentments were justified or not. And we talked about this in step 4. Real or fancy, that doesn't make any difference. It says resentments have the power to kill me. Whether they are real or fancied. And that if I live my life in resentment, then what I am granting to other people is the power of life and death over me. So I have to learn how to take the power away from every human being on the face of the earth. Take that power away from them. I have to learn how to live my life, resentment and anger free. A burst of temper could spoil a day, and a well-nursed grudge could make us miserably ineffective. Nor were we ever skillful in separating justified from unjustified anger. As we saw it, our wrath was always justified. Anger, that occasional luxury of more balanced people, could keep us on an emotional jag indefinitely. These emotional dry benders often led straight to the bottle. Other kinds of disturbances, jealousy, envy, self-pity, or hurt pride, did the same. And I've heard a lot of people criticize Alcoholics Anonymous because they read this to say that you stuff your anger. And that is emotionally unhealthy because this book says, or my psychiatrist says, or this or that. It doesn't say stuff your anger. That is an unhealthy practice. It should not be done. What it says is to remove the causes of anger from your life by having a proper attitude. An attitude of humility and gratitude. A spot check inventory taken in the midst of such disturbances can be of very great help in quieting stormy emotions. Today's spot check finds its chief application to situations which arise in each day's march. The consideration of long-standing difficulties had better be postponed, when possible, to times deliberately set aside for that purpose. The quick inventory is aimed at our daily ups and downs, especially those where people or new events throw us off balance and tempt us to make mistakes. In all situations, we need restraint, honest analysis of what is involved, a willingness to admit when the fault is ours, and an equal willingness to forgive when the fault is elsewhere. It's okay to forgive people. Remember, we talked about the 4 response values to any situation. Forgive, forget, accept, or resent. And I had to learn that there were 3 options besides resent. We need not be discouraged when we fall into the error of our old ways, for these disciplines are not easy. We shall look for progress, not perfection. There's going to be a lot of failure. About being on the mark in any of these steps all the time. It says in how it works, progress, not perfection. Our first objective will be the development of self-restraint. Holy mackerel. I never knew what the word meant. I thought if I thought it, it was right. I thought if I thought it, I had to say it. I thought if I thought it, I had to do it. And I mean right now. Not at the appropriate time, right now. Self-restraint. This carries a top priority rating. When we speak or act hastily or rashly, the ability to be fair-minded and tolerant evaporates on the spot.
Take a breath.
There's 5 of them that causes this on-the-spot evaporation. 5 what? The 5 symptoms of spiritual sickness. What else? I'm glad you asked. Criticism. Complaining. Condemning. Comparing. Competing.
What's the first one?
Pardon me?
What was the first one?
Criticizing. Criticism. When I criticize somebody else, and I'm sorry, but I'm going to have to leave the federal government out of this because I can't give that up. I wish I could, but I'm trying. When I criticize somebody, that means that there is something wrong with me. And we all know what criticism is. And I think the criticism that I hear that is most repugnant is when I hear in the fellowship people talking about how sick somebody else is. If you were well, or if I was well, I wouldn't be here in order to see how sick somebody else is. And the wellest one among us is as sick as a dead mule. Yeah, there's a lot of sick people around here, and I'm one of them. And I was one of these sick people around here that people call sick because I didn't know how to try. I'm trying today. You may still think I'm sick, and that's okay. It doesn't have anything to do with me what you think. And I don't care if you do call me sick. But it's not doing you any good to call me sick. That's just a little pet peeve of mine that I want to talk about related to criticism. Keep coming back, right, Doris? Doris, I just love her. I would stay up nights trying to think of something profound to say at a meeting, and I'd do my damnedest, and Doris would say, "Keep coming back." That went on for about 4 years, didn't it?
I'm glad you kept coming back.
Yeah. Well, she still says keep coming back. Where did I lost my train of thought here. I'm okay.
He was right at the dead mule.
I was riding a dead mule, right. So, when I criticize somebody, that means that they are not behaving the way that I want them to, like that has something to do with me. You know, I've really got my nose in somebody else's business then. Complaining means that I just haven't got all the things that are important to me in my life arranged the way God doesn't want them. I don't have enough money, my car, my wife. Yeah. Complaining is an indication that I'm still trying to arrange everything to suit me. Condemning people means that I have no love of my fellow man. Comparing myself to other people, whether it's to make myself feel better or to make myself feel bad, doesn't make any difference. The result's the same. It's spiritual sickness. I am who I am, and I am what I am right now. And that's good enough. I don't have to compare myself to anybody. And competing, so that I always have to be first, always have to be right, always have to win the argument, always have to be boss. Is spiritual sickness. I learned how not to compete from a 2-year-old. I had to learn how to let a kid win a simple board game. And it was tough. And I didn't like it. But I had to learn that her feelings were important, not whether I won or not. I could have beaten the pants off of her. I pulled my punches. And I started to understand. Where was I? One unkind tirade or one willful snap judgment can ruin our relation with another person for a whole day or maybe a whole year. Nothing pays off like restraint of tongue and pen. Tongue, thy erring member. Engage brain first. We must avoid quick-tempered criticism and furious, power-driven arguments. The same goes for sulking or silent scorn. You know, the old, and I'm sure you all have read the pop psychology books, the passive-aggressive, the silent scorn. These are emotional booby traps, baited with pride and vengefulness. And remember, back in the fourth step, it says, it is by no accident that pride leads the procession of the 7 deadly sins. Pride and vengefulness. Pride will carry me into waters charted only by an active drunk. And when I get prideful, I start acting like a drunk. Our first job is to sidestep the traps. When we are tempted by the bait, we should train ourselves to step back and think. For we can neither think nor act to good purpose until the habit of self-restraint has become automatic, just because it comes into my brain does not require action, physical action on my part. And that's what step 10 is about in these spot check inventories. What's going on in my mind and what is it about to cause me to do that I'm not going to be proud of. Disagreeable or unexpected problems are not the only ones that call for self-control. We must be quite as careful when we begin to achieve some measure of importance and material success, for no people have ever loved personal triumphs more than we have loved them. We drank of success as of a wine which could never fail to make us feel elated. When temporary good fortune came our way, we indulged ourselves in fantasies of still greater victories over people and circumstances. Thus, blinded by prideful self-confidence, I'm sorry, I ate some hush puppies at Long John Silver's last night, and they're still with me. Thus, you think it's funny, I wish your stomach was this upset. Thus, blinded by prideful self-confidence, we are apt to play the big shot. Of course, people turned away from us, bored or hurt. Now that we're in AA and sober and winning back the esteem of our friends and business associates, we find that we still need to exercise special vigilance. Someone has taken pity on me. Good Lord, Rolaids and all kinds of antacids are coming from around the table. It's like a convention of furniture salesmen around here. Thank you very much. Is this gum?
They're good.
It's not?
It is.
It is. It is? I'm sorry. I've got too much invested in my dental work. Chew gum.
It dissolves.
You're kidding. Well, I tell you what, if I send you in there with a toothbrush to clean it off my bridge work,
I do an Ed for him.
Yeah, keep coming back. Now that we're in AA and sober and winning back the esteem, I've read that. We find that we still need to exercise special vigilance. As an insurance against big shotism, we can often check ourselves by remembering that we are today sober only by the grace of God, and that any success we may be having is far more His success than ours. My ability to live my life today comes from power greater than myself that I found in the fellowship by working the 12-step program of Alcoholics Anonymous. My success really doesn't have a lot to do with me today, whatever that might be. I've learned here just to do what's in front of me. And that's what success in life is about. Success defined by happy, joyous, and free. Not by Cadillacs. Or whatever else. Countachs or whatever they are. Finally, and oh, this is a terrible paragraph. Some of you might want to close your eyes. I know I did for many years. Finally, we begin to see that all people, including ourselves, are to some extent emotionally ill, as well as frequently wrong. And then we approach true tolerance and see what real love of our fellows actually means. It will become more and more evident as we go forward that it is pointless to become angry or to get hurt by people who, like us, are suffering from the pains of growing up. Every human being is always in a process of how am I going to live my life today, whether they know it or not, or whether they like it or not. Everybody is suffering from the pains of trying to grow up. And like me, everybody that comes into my life on any basis is emotionally and spiritually ill. It's only a matter of degree. It's only a matter of what are they doing about it or not doing about it as to where they are in their life. So, do I want to increase the burdens of a person that is as troubled, or was as troubled, or will be as troubled as me by my behavior? Do I really want to impose myself on another sick human being? Or do I want to try and help them? That's my decision. How am I going to live my life? Such a radical change in our outlook will take time, and I double underline this, maybe a lot of time. Not many people can truthfully assert that they love everybody. Most of us admit that we have loved but a few, that we have been quite indifferent to the many so long as none of them gave us any trouble. And as for the remainder, well, we have really disliked or hated them. And we got a few that we tolerated, a few we didn't, and the rest we hated. That's about the way I thought. Although these attitudes are common enough, we AAs find we need something much better in order to keep our balance. We can't stand it if we hate deeply. The idea that we can be possessively loving of a few, can ignore the many, and continue to fear or hate anybody has to be abandoned, if only a little at a time. I've got to start making some progress on this. We can try to stop making unreasonable demands upon those we love. Boy, that's a tough one. If they love me, they can do it, right? We can show kindness where we had shown none. I can show kindness anywhere. Anything I did was a start. With those we dislike, we can begin to practice justice and courtesy. You want to learn how to love people? Find one you hate and be kind to him. Perhaps going out of our way to understand and help them.
Where do you find someone like that?
Just hang around, they'll come through. Perhaps going out of our way to understand and help them. You know, I always like to say this in the 12th step, that most of us at some point, whether it's early in our sobriety or throughout our sobriety, aren't very lovable. You know. But the standard I try to hold myself to is that if I don't love them, who will? I try to go out of my way to find somebody that I don't like and understand and help them. You know, I don't spend as much time up here in this office as I used to. It's not because I don't want to, I just don't have the time to do it. You should see some of the characters I've spent hours with. Some of them are in this room. You want to learn how to tolerate somebody. Find somebody you hate. And give them yourself. You have to learn how to start doing this in here. Then you can do it anywhere. Whenever we fail any of these people, we can promptly admit it to ourselves always and to them also when the admission would be helpful. Courtesy, kindness, justice, and love are the keynotes by which we may come into harmony with practically anybody. When in doubt, we can always pause saying, "Not my will, but thine be done." And we can often ask ourselves, am I doing to others as I would have them to do to me today? When evening comes, perhaps just before going to sleep, many of us draw up a balance sheet for the day. This is a good place to remember that inventory is not always done in red ink. Indeed, it's a poor day indeed when we haven't done something right. Something right. As a matter of fact, the waking hours are usually filled with things that are constructive. Good intentions, good thoughts, and good acts are there for us to see. Even when we have... God damn. Every time I read this, I get choked up. Even when we have tried hard and failed, we may chalk that up as one of the greatest credits of all. That may have kept me alive, because I tried and failed. And all the program asks of anybody is to try. It doesn't say you have to succeed to be successful. It just says try. Try what? Don't drink one day at a time. Go to meetings. read the big book, get a sponsor, and do what they ask you to do. If they don't ask you to do anything, get another sponsor. If there's a secret formula, that's it. All I have to do is try. Under these conditions, the pains of failure are converted into assets. Remember in step 7, it talked about the function of pain and about how we rebuild our lives on the ashes of the old, on the rubble. Out of them we receive the stimulation we need to go forward. Someone who knew what he was talking about once remarked that pain was the touchstone of all spiritual progress. The way I read this book, the books, is that without pain there is no spiritual progress. Spiritual progress is something that comes out of the fire. It doesn't come out of a nice cool refrigerator. It comes out of the fire. I cannot avoid pain because that is my way to a new life. I should not dread the pain. And as I said in step 7, pain is the messenger. It's not my enemy. Pain is telling me to do something different. How heartily we AAs can agree with him, for we know that the pains of drinking had to come before sobriety and emotional turmoil before serenity. So before any of these positive things that can happen in my life, I've had to endure all of the negative. How would I know I was making any progress if I didn't have somewhere to go? If I didn't have drunkenness to compare sobriety to, how in the hell would I know I'm sober? I feel sorry for my wife. She never knows she's sober. She doesn't drink. She doesn't even think about being sober. So she doesn't appreciate it. I appreciate being sober, because I know I've got something to compare the two conditions to. As we glance down the debit side of the day's ledger, we should carefully examine our motives in each thought or act that appears to be wrong. In most cases, our motives won't be hard to see and understand. When prideful, angry, jealous, anxious, or fearful, we acted accordingly, and that was that. Here we need only recognize that we did act or think badly, trying to visualize how we might have done better, and resolve with God's help to carry these lessons over into tomorrow, making, of course, any amends still neglected. But in other instances, only the closest scrutiny will reveal what our true motives were. There are cases where our ancient enemy, rationalization, has stepped in and has justified conduct which was really wrong. The temptation here is to imagine that we had good motives and reasons when we really didn't. And this is hard to dig out. But we start working on it in step 11 a little harder. We constructively criticize someone who needed it, when our real motive was to win a useless argument. Or the person concerned not being present, we thought we were helping others to understand him, when in actuality our true motive was to feel superior by pulling him down. We sometimes hurt those we love because they need to be taught a lesson when we really want to punish. We were depressed and complained we felt bad, when in fact we were mainly asking for sympathy and attention. This odd trait of mind and emotion, this perverse excuse me, I think I'm going to make it through this. This perverse wish to hide a bad motive underneath a good one permeates human affairs from top to bottom. And what that means that it is not an alcoholic problem, it is a human problem. Hide a bad motive underneath a good one. All people do this to one degree or another. And remember, early on, I said I wasn't always able to figure out what a person's motives were when I was trying to figure out whether I'd been offended or not. You know, and that's because motives are always tangled up and hidden in many cases. This subtle and elusive kind of self-righteousness can underlie the smallest act or thought. Learning daily to spot, admit, and correct these flaws is the essence of character building and good living. An honest regret for harms done, a genuine gratitude for blessings received, and a willingness to try for better things tomorrow will be the permanent assets we shall seek. An honest regret for harms done, a genuine gratitude for blessings received. And everything that comes into my life is a blessing. Doesn't make any difference whether I like it or not. If it's in my life, it's a blessing. It may take me a while to figure out how I have been so blessed. Nevertheless, when I start complaining and criticizing about it, I get spiritually sick. And a willingness to try for better things tomorrow will be the permanent assets we shall seek. And what step 10 is talking about is the three great virtues. Faith, hope, and charity. Faith that God loves me. And that all things that happen to me will ultimately be for my benefit. Hope that I will be able to do better tomorrow, to be of service to other people. And charity in all things I say, think, and do. Charity to other people. Having so considered our day, not admitting to take due note of things well done, and having searched our hearts with neither fear nor favor, we can truly thank God for the blessings we have received and sleep in good conscience. Good night.